Hi, everyone. Welcome to today. Thanks for being here. I'm Michelle Glassman, Armor's Director of Marketing, and I'm your moderator today. And the event, I just wanted to let you know, is being recorded, and you'll receive the link to the recording as well as a link to Armor's Cyber Resilience Assessment for healthcare. This is complimentary to you as for coming today. And before I introduce our panel, I want to walk through some logistics. Today is not intended to be a slide deck review. It's intended to be a conversation. So we've got 4 people on this panel who live in healthcare compliance, incident response, cloud security every day. These are your experts. And we're going to spend the next hour talking through what the proposed HIPAA security rule changes actually mean for your organization and what you can do about it. So let me introduce who's here with us. Hi, Nancy. We have Nancy Free, who is Armor's Head of Risk and GRC. She's been tracking the proposed security rules since the NPRM dropped, and she'll ground us in what's actually changing. Hi, Chris. We've got Chris Stoof. He's Armor's Chief Security Officer, and he runs incident response, and we'll talk about what happens when the breach hits and when the clock starts ticking. We've got Esteban Rubin, who is Healthcare Field CTO at Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. He works with healthcare organizations every day and has a front row seat to how they're being targeted and where the gaps are. And finally, last but not least, we've got Irfan Seatork, who joins us from Microsoft as a Senior Solution Engineering Director. And he's focused on health and life sciences. He works with healthcare organizations, navigating compliance and security in the cloud every day. So a couple final housekeeping items. We'll be here for about 60 minutes. We've got live polls. We'll put them up throughout the conversation. And they take about 10 seconds to respond to. We've also got Q&A, so make sure you ask your questions and get those answered. Don't wait to drop your questions in the Q&A. You can do that at any time, and we'll make sure at the end we'll slate 15 minutes for questions and that they get answered. And also, if there's any questions we can't get to, we will make sure that you do get answers to them and get answers from the experts. And so, all right, let's jump into it. So where we're going to start is we're going to start with Nancy. So Nancy, let's kick it off with the headline. The proposed HIPAA security rule has been called the biggest update in over a decade. What are the challenges that should have healthcare organizations paying attention right now?
Well, I do agree, and that framing is really accurate. This really is the most significant proposed overhaul since 2013, and there's a few things that I want really every healthcare leader to understand, even given the uncertainty around whether it's going to get finalized as written. The change I keep coming back to is the elimination of what's called addressable standards. Under the current rule, if a safeguard was listed as addressable, an organization could essentially document a reason why it wasn't practical for them and move on. And that flexibility is going away. The expectation is that controls are implemented, tested, and proved, and not just described in a policy document. That's really a cultural shift as much as a technical one, and it applies regardless of how the final rule shakes out. On the technical side, the specific requirements getting the most attention are multi-factor authentication, encryption of patient data both in transit and at rest, network segmentation, biannual vulnerability scans, and annual pen testing. Now, none of those are unreasonable in isolation. In fact, most security professionals would say that that's just good hygiene at this point. The fight from the industry side is really about the implementation timelines and the cost, not whether the controls themselves make sense. There's also a 72-hour incident response requirement. Is another one that deserves serious attention. It's not a documentation deadline. This is like an operational deadline. You need to be able to contain, respond to, and restore systems within 72 hours of a security incident. A lot of organizations are just not structured to do that today. And then there's a requirement that surprises people when they hear it for the first time. Terminated employees' access to systems must end no later than 1 hour after termination. 1 hour. That might be difficult to implement in situations when employee terminations are sudden and unexpected, which of course is exactly when the risk is at its highest. For organizations that run on manual offboarding processes or rely on IT tickets being submitted and worked in a queue, that's going to be a fundamental workflow problem, not just a policy tweak. Business associate oversight is also changing in a meaningful way. Right now, a signed business associate agreement is largely treated as a finish line. Under the proposed rule, covered entities would need annual written verification that their vendors have actually implemented the required safeguards. That's fundamentally a different ask. It's just vendor management from a contract exercise to an ongoing assurance program. And that extends all the way down to subcontractors as business associates, which opens up a much longer tail of accountability. The last thing I'd flag from a technical perspective is the asset inventory requirement. Organizations would need to maintain and annually update a complete technical asset inventory and network map. And then they have to tie their risk analyses directly to that inventory. And that sounds pretty straightforward. I mean, it doesn't sound like that would be that big of a deal, but for a lot of healthcare organizations, especially those with legacy systems, acquired entities, or sprawling IoT environments, they genuinely don't have a complete picture of where all their patient data lives. So that requirement is going to force a reckoning. As far as cost goes, this is where the industry pushback really gets the loudest. And honestly, the numbers really kind of back that up. The HHS estimated a combined first-year price tag of roughly $9.3 billion across regulated entities and plan sponsors. That's not a rounding error. And those costs aren't evenly distributed either. The burden falls disproportionately on smaller providers, rural hospitals, critical access facilities, and safety net organizations that are already operating on thin margins with limited IT staff. The industry argument isn't that cybersecurity investment is wrong. It's just that it's an unfunded mandate of the scale on a compressed timeline to just really create a serious operational strain without a corresponding improvement in actual security outcomes. One thing I feel like people may wonder about in the proposal is enforcement. The OCR collected over $6 million in fines last year, which you may think, is that a lot? I don't know. Given the number and the scale of the breaches that we saw, including Change Healthcare, which affected over 190 million people, I'm not sure that number is even meaningful, really, which is part of actually what makes this new proposed security rule interesting from an enforcement standpoint. The shift from addressable to mandatory standards isn't just about security outcomes, it makes the violations easier to prove. Right now, an organization can argue that it can make that reasonable determination not to implement a control, but under the new framework, it is going to make that really disappear. That defense is going to disappear. So even if the fine amounts don't change dramatically, the frequency and clarity of enforcement, those actions really could significantly increase. So underlying tension is real. If the goal is to actually change behavior at scale, the current penalty structure isn't going to do that. The stronger rules without stronger enforcement teeth, that's only going to get them so far. So that's the question this proposed rule doesn't fully answer. This is something that the industry really should be pressing regulators on. And I'm curious to see how they're going to do that. Sorry, I went a long way around. But that's things that are changing, things the industry should be aware of.
Esteban, you shared along the way with us some striking data with us about the scale of healthcare breaches. When Nancy says every safeguard is now mandatory, does that match the urgency that you're seeing from healthcare organizations on the ground?
Not at all. No, I get that the unfunded mandate and the kind of compressed timeline is a problem. It's just that I've been seeing for the last, 20 years I've been in health, that there doesn't seem to be a precipitating factor for people to finally kind of react in an appropriate way. So it might be kind of the wake up call that some people need, because we have the technology and we have the process to make things better, and yet bad things keep happening. We keep seeing human error leaving S3 buckets open to the world, and misconfigurations, and all sorts of things that end up, I think, especially for the Change Healthcare breach, I think we all got the letter, right? 190 million people, everybody in the US essentially. So it's a conundrum, because even though we all understand how important this is, and it's nothing new, probably 15 years ago when I was working medical imaging, I had a customer that was it was a chain of imaging centers, and they were targeted by a nation state because they saw a lot of patients who were in the military, and the nation state wasn't interested in healthcare records for people who were serving in the military. And this was 15 years ago, and things have only gotten worse. So, kind of in short, not to overextend myself, no, I don't see that it's getting better. People really have appreciated how important it is to really do these things.
Yeah, and Irfan, from Microsoft's vantage point, are healthcare customers already treating these as mandatory, or are most still in wait and see mode?
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, from my perspective, working closely with healthcare providers at Microsoft, I'm seeing a shift that it's evolving towards trying to treat these changes as more mandatory, even though the rule itself isn't final yet. And the driver isn't really fear or speculation, it's this lived experience. Many of the CISOs, the CIOs, and the compliance leaders I work with have already been through some sort of breach, an OCR inquiry, or a difficult board conversation where they had to explain some security gaps after the fact. And those experiences tend to change how organizations think about regulations, and they don't want to be in a position where they're explaining intent or good faith. They want to be able to show evidence. So because of that, the conversations I'm having are much less about interpreting this regulatory language and much more about the operational reality and rigor. Instead of asking, what does this wording really mean? They're asking more questions like, if this was enforced tomorrow, where would we struggle? Which controls do we believe we have, but haven't actually validated end to end? How can we map our technology and to these controls? And to Esteban's point, we have the technology already in place, whether we're talking Microsoft or Oracle, it's there. Now these organizations that still look like they're in a wait and see mode, it's, in my experience, it's rarely disbelief or negligence. It's usually constraints, clinical systems that can't move quickly. We have a lot of legacy systems in healthcare that we really have to keep from a business standpoint. Staffing shortages, budget cycles don't align neatly with regulatory timelines. So what's interesting though is that even those organizations are doing the quiet prep work, documenting decisions, identifying gaps, socializing risk with leadership. So they're really not starting from zero later. So what feels different this time, in my assumption, is that most leaders I'm talking to are already assuming the enforcement will be real, timelines will be tight, and the expectations around proof will be higher. So instead of waiting to be told what to do, they're preparing for that accountability.
This is a really good segue. I did want to take a moment to poll the audience, because, Irfan, one of the things, or some of the things that you were mentioning, were around where people are at in the timing of this. How are they preparing for it? And so wanted to take a moment to pull up our first poll. Just give it a chance to become live. I think everyone can see it now. And so how is your organization approaching the proposed HIPAA security rule changes? Are you waiting for the final rule, option A? Are you aware but haven't assessed the gaps yet? Option B, are you using the proposed rule as a roadmap? And that's option C. Or D, are you already meeting most requirements?
And while those are coming in, I think the interesting thing here that we're looking at is nothing in the proposed rule changes is making a security person or compliance risk professional scratch their head and be like, where did that come from? These are all things that we would aspire to do. These are all things that we wish we could do. And so it's almost like common knowledge to us that we want to do this. They are tightening the timelines, which we'll talk about later. But with that, if they're not going to bring teeth to the enforcement, then it's not going to move the decision makers to change the budget strategy to afford these changes. That's why you have plans to execute these. You've got the technology, you don't have the implementation because you don't afford the migration. You've got the ability to upgrade the old system, but it's going to cost $9 million. And that's a business decision not to do that. So if we can't get the enforcement coming with these, then it's still going to be continuing that the board's going to choose to write off the risk as a financial number and just keep going until the enforcement comes around. So I'm curious if that's also how your customers and partners are seeing that as well.
What about the reputational risk? Because I see that as increasing. I think Irfan was talking about before. There's the financial aspect for sure, but there's certainly smaller, not hospitals, but practices that have had to shut down after a breach. And then kind of the community kind of shaming and whatever other kind of aspects you want to talk about. So what do you guys see in that regard?
Well, I think there's definitely a significant risk of reputational risk that just doesn't go away. I think as consumers, we get a little bit complacent in the idea that how many of these letters do we get in a week, right? I mean, how many times is our data being breached? Yeah. And just how much credit protection can we receive? How many people are monitoring our credit at this point, right? So I don't know that they consider reputational risk quite as damning as maybe it was even 5-10 years ago, because there's just so much breach. I mean, with the $6 million number in fines in this past year, by researchers showing that was against roughly 1,000 breaches in the healthcare industry last year, excuse me. So, if you're looking at 1,000 significant breaches, besides just the one, 190 million with just the Change Healthcare breach, I mean, how do you get to, we're going to fine an industry $6 million, and you've got that, what is that average? 2 significant breaches a day, 3 significant breaches a day. It sounds like writing off risk is our standard play. And
it's not even a slap on the wrist. It's like a high five slap on the wrist. Like I was at Goldman Sachs when GDPR came out, 2% really mattered, right? And so that actually had some teeth, and that actually moved to a faster incident response cycle. And that was only up to breach and notification. We only cared about how much damage was done, not how we're going to recover it, right? Which we'll talk about. But with that, like if high trust and HIPAA, if HIPAA stays here where there's no teeth to the enforcement behind it, if you're not going to get to 2%, 10%, the behaviors are not going to change. And to the point of reputational risk, sure, the reputational risk in the community and to the customer base is real, but the people that get to make the decisions, 5 to 10 years ago, big black eye to CISOs if you've been a part of breach. Now it's almost like a badge of honor. Hey, I can prove that I've survived one of these. And so there's not this black eye stigma around it. It's more about a badge of experience. And I honestly don't see enough board member pressure or boards pressuring executives after a breach, right? They sit down, they said, did you contain it? Did you handle marketing correctly? Okay, cool. Stay in your job and let's figure out how we're going to recover. It is not the same beast that it was 10 years ago.
Yeah,
I agree.
and from a healthcare standpoint, I mean, beside the reputational risk, we're dealing with people's lives here. And in the event that we have some sort of breach or incident that occurs, we can be impacting a potential surgery or protecting providers from able to provide patient care. So we have to take it as we are much more important than just on the reputational risk itself.
And I want to respond so bad, but we've got to get Michelle to get the next question out because it pertains to that. So, Michelle.
Yeah. So really quick, I want to share the results of the poll with the audience. So just a moment, just so that everyone can see. Oop, it just popped down. Let's do that again. There we go. So answer A got 24%. So waiting for the final roll, but B and C, we're looking at about even at 29%, and D is trailing. So already meeting most of the requirements. Looks like we've got some work to do, but that's why we're here today. All right. And let's go to the next question. So what you were already talking about is honestly the perfect segment, okay? And just want to double click, Chris, on that, the proposed rule is introducing some aggressive notification times, around 72 hours to notify covered entities, 24 hours to accept changes. And as someone who runs incident response every day, what does that actually look like operationally when the clock starts ticking?
Yeah, so now I can go in and piggyback on off of Irfan's statement. What's important here is that we've always seen that notifications are breach notifications, right? Your information was exposed and we're sorry, here's your credit monitoring memo. And those were kind of left at your discretion. What you're seeing now is that these indicators are not just whenever data is exfiltrated or impacted, but we're actually moving more around the CIA triad out of just confidentiality, but into integrity and availability, which is if I enact my backup plan, I need to let you know, right? Because something went wrong. My data did not go the way I was expecting it. So any type of business operation that's going to hit your BCDR plan or some other very stated markers here, you have a very discrete timeline of 24 hours to notify those out. I would call out that supply chain. There's no more that, hey, I got a note from my vendor on Friday and on Tuesday I opened up the email, right? So you're gonna have to put some vigor around your supply chain because when those things start going, they're gonna be a cascading notification. And there's really no incident response needed on some of that stuff to be able to pass those notifications along. And so I think we're gonna see some enforcement around that and some struggles around that. On the 72 hour, is beyond notification. And I want to be sure that we kind of cover into that because we used to be able to be like, hey, breach, here's my notification, here's my timer, I hope you're happy. And we'll restore services as we can, as our business tolerates it, right? So your BCDR was kind of funded from a business risk perspective, not as a response to a threat or to an incident. And now you actually have a timer. So that 72-hour timer includes not just containment and notification, but it includes return to service, right? So when we have patient lives on the line, you cannot take longer than 72 hours to put the services back online. If they can't get to those medical records, if they can't see the drug histories, if they can't see the prescriber's notes, these are critical assets to lives out there. And so I think 72 hours is way too long. But, when we look at the business ability to be able to execute on a recovery plan, so your DevOps team, your systems team, your database team, all of these teams are going to come in with your IR team, where previously you could just bring your security team and meet most of the mandates. You can't do that anymore. You actually have to have your BCDR, not on paper. It's got to be practiced, exercised, proven, and your CISO or your risk or your CIO is going to have to be underwriting that and saying we will restore services within 72 hours. Unknown impact, but we will recover all services in 72 hours. So I think that is going to probably be the hardest one to hit. And what I'm hoping is that change the way that budget dollars are assigned so that we can get back to making sure that we protect confidentiality, integrity, and availability, just as important as we did with confidentiality. But without teeth, I'm highly concerned that this is going to be another, oops, I missed my 72 hours. Sorry, HIPAA, we'll try again next year. So with that, right, the 24-hour notices, right, those should be table stakes for us. The 72 hours, I think, is going to change the game because you're going all the way through recovery. If you're here, if if you're engaged and trying to do what's right for your patients and your providers, you will have already been doing BCDR, right? So maybe you're at a 1 week timer on your DR plan. That's a great starting place, right? So tighten that up. If you didn't have a BCDR, we've got a lot of work to do. You got a lot of catch up to do. So this could bring in a whole lot of work. But I'm not too worried about the enforcement piece yet, but we should all strive to hit these timers.
Excellent. And so, Nancy, let's talk about what that looks like from the operational side of things. So from a compliance standpoint, what documentation do organizations need to have in place? And before a breach happens, so they're not scrambling during these 72 hours.
Yeah, so you're going to definitely need your asset inventory. You're going to need your network map, which is, two of those things that we've already been talking about that are requirements that you're going to need. You need your incident response plan that you have already exercised. I would say those are probably three of your biggest things. I would also add probably your risk registry. That I don't know that would be one that people would always automatically think of, but I think if you are aware of some of the risks that you're tracking in your organization, then you might have a bit of a clue as to where some of your incidents might be potentially stemming from. I think oftentimes you're not necessarily correlating your risks to your potential areas of breach in your organization. And I think sometimes that's a bit of a gap. So I think that those would be the four, right? Documents that I would definitely be carrying into those conversations, making sure that you have.
And if those are your first four, your second folder should have your BCDR plan and your critical vendor contacts.
Yes.
Any other ones, Esteban? Can you think of?
Nothing substantially different, but the focus on rapid recovery. That is something that I've been talking about for a while, and I don't know that healthcare is very good at thinking about that. I see a lot more preoccupation with avoiding things, and to everybody's point, breaches are going to happen. So not really feasible to think that you're going to just add enough layers that you're going to be insulated. So these systems, whether it's an EHR or a PACS or time management system or whatever it is that is critical, they are complex, right? And so having the data protected is usually not enough, especially in the light of this 72-hour requirement for being back on. So just BCDR, yeah, but I see that often people maybe don't test it enough, and just maybe changing the terminology from things, things that may have become noise. It's like, business continuance. Yeah, I've talked to people who think that business continuance is having mirrored data, and clearly that is not true. But there are thousands and thousands of healthcare organizations, and it's tough when a few may not kind of have the basics. So I love to talk about rapid recovery. It's like it's a new thing, and it's like, forget about everything else. How are you actually going to get back to an operational mode within 72 hours? And I think bringing it all together, with the new, the changes in the regulation and, slightly different terminology, I think it's worth a shot, because often I feel that some of these things become noise and people are not in tune as much as they should be.
I wonder if maybe a BIA would go along with that, so that you know which systems you're going to need that rapid recovery for.
Absolutely.
So Irfan, how do we attack that from the solution engineering and maybe Microsoft experience, right? Does this change the way that we have to architect? Does this change the way we need to engineer, or is this just rapid skill set and deployments? Like how do we attack it?
Well, I mean, just to kind of piggyback off of Esteban here, I mean, the organizations that I feel have the most confidence in these scenarios are the ones that have walked through this together. I mean, they've done these tabletop exercises that they clarify the people process component, not just the technology. They've aligned with the different stakeholders involved, legal, compliance, and security, before they're under pressure. So, I mean, the difference between that confidence and chaos within that 72 hours is really about the tools. It's about the preparation, the clarity, and the muscle memory. And perfecting those is what I feel we can get to a better state and make sure that we are comfortable in the event that we do have to execute these rapid recovery scenarios.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears just a little bit to round us out with our third topic. And, this is about making your cloud environment HIPAA ready. Let's kick it off, Irfan, since you were rounding out the last question, and tell us about, the Azure side of things, organizations living in Microsoft's ecosystem, Purview, Defender, sensitivity labels. How does that stack map to the proposed HIPAA requirements, and where does the shared responsibility get tricky?
Yeah, I mean, I'm having these conversations daily. This is near and dear to my heart. So when healthcare teams ask me about this, I usually take a step back from the product names, because we have a lot of products in the stack and we want to really map it to the outcomes HIPAA is really trying to push toward: stronger access controls, mandatory encryption, continuous risk assessment and analysis, faster response and recovery, segmentation, and most importantly, out of all of that, how do I prove that? So just kind of rounding off things that everybody's been talking about. The way I explain it from the Microsoft perspective is Microsoft Purview is your data governance and evidence layer. Defender is going to be your threat and vulnerability layer. Entra ID, previously Azure Active Directory, and Intune are your identity and device control layer. So when you wrap that with incident response and recovery, you can meet the timelines HIPAA is emphasizing. So yeah, it starts with access. The proposed updates are very clear about tightening access to EPHI. So MFA, conditional access, stop being optional in this case. So in practice, this maps to our Entra ID capabilities for strong identity access controls and governance, especially as workforce access changes over time. So once that access is controlled, the next question is always going to be, do we actually know where our EPHI is and how it's moving? That's where Microsoft Purview becomes crucial here. Purview helps you discover and classify that sensitive data, and things like sensitivity labels will help you operationalize that by making sure EPHI is consistently labeled, encrypted, and handled accordingly to policies. So whether it's in your core systems, your email, your collaboration solutions, your endpoints, or your cloud storage. So from there, HIPAA is really focused on preventing exposure and being able to show enforcement. So the data protection, audit, and investigation capabilities of Purview help you prevent things like leakage, and just as importantly, help you reconstruct what happened if something does go wrong. That's a big part of that proof, the story of how organizations can really start caring about. And just to kind of continue on that, the continuous risk analysis side, this is where Microsoft Defender comes in. Defender helps with ongoing vulnerability management, threat detection, external attack surface visibility. And what I see with customers is that this is often where they're uncovering gaps and they didn't actually know existed. Things like unpatched systems, exposed services, configuration drift that creates that risk over time. So HIPAA really expects organizations to understand their environment and limit the blast radius. Things that Nancy has been talking about, the asset inventory, network visibility, segmentation really matter in the hybrid healthcare environments. Let's be real, in healthcare, we all have hybrid environments. This is not something we're just focused on one vendor. And to top it off with device management, cloud security posture, and network controls, all these things work together. So finally, most important from my perspective, operational readiness. The direction from HIPAA is very clear: detect, respond, and recover quickly. It's not enough to say you have backups. The real question is whether you can restore what matters within that required window and demonstrate that you've tested it. So big picture, when healthcare providers kind of put this together, I like to think about it like this. We have a lot in our Microsoft security stack, so I try to simplify it as best as possible. Purview and things like sensitivity labels help you find, classify, protect, and prove control over EPHI. Defender helps you continuously reduce risk and detect threats. Entra ID and Intune help you control access and devices. When these pieces work harmoniously together, organizations aren't just checking a compliance box. They're building a real readiness for the timelines and scrutiny that the proposed HIPAA updates are really driving towards. So, I mean, I love kind of your perspective as well, Esteban, from the Oracle side.
Yeah. So a lot of what you said, right? Maybe different names. My one big concern is that, so we have all these things available in our clouds, yet a lot of the applications have their own, and they don't always, work in a very well integrated way with what's available. So doing audits is vital. And I think having the Overwatch, right, what we call Cloud Guard, I think is fundamental, because not everything is cloud native. We know that in healthcare, there are a lot of systems that are quite antiquated and legacy, and they certainly are not cloud native. And so if they're running as a lift and shift, it's important to be looking for possible pain points all the time and highlighting them, because it's not just about how you configure things and kind of whether you're following best practices, but sometimes even the IT teams in a provider organization don't have the visibility, right? Because it may be that the ISV configures things for them, and there are things that no one has thought about, right? Even backups. I remember kind of systems where the ISV thought that the customer was going to do the backups, and the customer thought that the ISV was doing the backups, and then no one was doing the backups, and this is just years ago. So they're in the cloud native systems. Yeah, of course, like IAM and highlighting areas to improve the security posture, enforcing MFA, all of that is huge. But living in this, as you rightly call it, hybrid world, we have to extend the vigilance, right? Outside of the cloud environment, and we see that all the time, especially as this data becomes even more valuable, right? Like we know whatever multiple use, 10x the value of healthcare data over, say, financial data. Well, now that we have ever richer healthcare data stored in these clinical systems, especially as we go into genomic data, that kind of compounds the nightmare, because you can even say, well, things like imaging, like EHR data that's structured, you can redact, right? You can have a database that will kind of take care of some things. Can do encryption within the application or the database, but there are things that you just can't, right? At some point, there are things that are impossible by their very nature to obscure. Yeah, of course, you can encrypt the payload, but anytime you have something that is visible, there are things that you can de-identify, and there are things that you cannot. And I think that makes the value to the threat actors even higher. So it's almost like we're always walking in quicksand, because if we had the ability to sort of magically architect everything as cloud native, we would have a solution for it, no doubt. But we're running stuff. Some of these systems, they're using databases written in the 60s, right? And they're still, happily chugging along. And, there may be some layers of improvement, but the core is whatever, 60 years old.
Structured, unstructured data sets. You have data within M365. You have data in file shares. How are you kind of cohesively protecting all this, putting it together 100%?
Oh, Chris, you're on mute.
I apologize. I knew I was going to do that sometime today. Yeah, I don't think it's going to apply to all organizations and every one of ours that we have the pleasure of protecting and securing. But I do think, and I do hope, that the proposed rule changes, if ratified, are going to allow some of our customers to modernize their stack. in response to what is being asked, to say, hey, look, we are going to do this because this is the new standard of what we should be doing. So I do hope we should modernize some of that. And outside of that, it is going to be, like you guys said, it's hybrid. It's a lot of kind of cobbled together things, but we've got to get to where our processes have been tested, and you're proving that out. And it's not just a plan, but it's the actual execution with your partners, right? Calling on Oracle or calling on OCI and calling on Microsoft. What is the plan here? How do you help me get this done? As well as working to just indoctrinate your team to understand that that's going to have to be there. That this care for full depth recovery and delivery of service. I can't get past that. I can't get past that. That is the hope and dream that HIPAA is putting forward here. I don't know if all the words are right, and I don't think the enforcement's right, but I do think that this should be like a North Star for the organizations that are listening, that we have an opportunity to up our game.
And then Stu, from an AI governance perspective, or we've been talking a lot about HIPAA and AI, is there something that you can share with the audience on that?
Yeah, I would love to. I was trying not to bring AI into the conversation today because I am at RSA, and all I've heard is AI all every day, all day. But no, so I was actually sitting next to a go-to-market leader for a major provider of AI security. And the conversation is this. When we first learned how to do AI, we got confused and we thought it was a service. So we gave it keys to the kingdom in the back end. If you look at how HIPAA is written, if you look at how PCI is written, if you look at how NIST is written, if you look at how all of us have grown into zero trust, identity-based protections, AI is an identity. And the example I can give you is that you could hire a corp IT person who's remote. And let's just say I hire them in Oklahoma tomorrow. And they interact with me on Teams and in email. And I onboard them with their particular access rights. And all of these things can be audited, vetted, fall into our standard processes and procedures. And I've never shook their hand, right? Maybe I saw them on a Teams call, but the video didn't change the outcome of it. So none of that matters in the execution of that role or the execution of that agent. So what we need to do is be sure that our identity-based bounds, our least privileged models, are extending to our AI in the correct context. And just like you wouldn't hire a contractor to be your CEO's executive assistant and your senior developer and your QA and your HIPAA advisor, right? That's too many keys in one person's bucket. So split out your AI. Be sure you're doing identity-based tracking. You already have the policies and procedures to manage this correctly. And I'll tell you that's what we do at Armor, and my security team's already responded to it. And they said, hey, I think this might be AI, but you know what we do? We just follow our identity-based playbooks. And I'm like, that's exactly what you should do. And so you can contain AI breaches and AI alerts the same way you handle any type of identity breach or alert. Now, if you're using it not in a kind of open clause model, if you're using it as the back end of your platform, use it as a service principal, right? But still, go for least privilege, go for least data models, and just protect it with the things that you already know how to. Just because AI is in the word doesn't make it special.
Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, I second that. I mean, AI should be treated just like any other system that handles protected health information. If an AI solution creates, accesses, stores, or outputs PHI, it should comply with the HIPAA rules. I mean, things like treat any AI touching PHI as HIPAA workload and require BAA with the vendors. Limit the AI access. I mean, if you are having it touch it, do we need to ensure that the access is there? Have those strong controls, encryption, access controls, logging, and AI governance. That's very important. Make that ongoing. Regular risk reviews, audit. This is the stuff that isn't the greatest, but most exciting things, but these are very crucial to your program. Making that rather than one-time approval, ongoing.
It's like all the rest of these controls, you have to have boundaries. There's need for, caution and alignment to a set of rules and a set of standards that we're all playing by. So
yeah, and understand who makes the agents that you may be deploying, because they may be part of an ISV solution, but it's as likely as it's not that they didn't make it. And so kind of this is all required and obvious, but I don't know that everybody's thinking about it. It's like, well, you have a BAA with your ISV. What agent are they deploying? Like, does that extend, talk to your legal team? These things are super important because we are seeing this crazy acceleration now. And that doesn't mean that we have to let our guard down. I mean, as a matter of fact, it means that we have to be much more guarded. It's more work. And I think it's probably work that none of us asked for, but yet here we are, right? It's reality. So it's, it requires to be more vigilant and to think through the ramifications, because there are so many more players involved that we may not be thinking about. So it just like we have to stretch our thinking to encompass all that.
Yeah, and don't misconstrue anything that I'm saying as saying stay away from AI and don't touch it. No, I think we should. I think we should embrace it.
The business is not going to allow that. I mean, that's a
It's
reality.
here.
And I missed the opportunity earlier when we were talking about Purview, but that is the unfun part of the job that is critical to AI that most people are trying to skip. And then they're like, I don't know how to control it. I'm like, that's because you don't know where your data is, right? So data discovery and data classification, it is the most, I hate doing it, but it's the most critical foundational piece to doing any of your policy above it. And so if you're not strong there, and Microsoft, if you're not doing Purview with your implementations team, you got to start that tomorrow or yesterday. So.
Yeah, so
and that's asset inventory, because if you don't know what you have, you can't attest security to it.
Thank you, everyone. I want to take a few minutes and give the audience a chance to ask their questions. We've got a question in the chat, and I think this can go to just about everyone. We want to get some differing points of view. Kurt has written in and said that 72 hours for full recovery is unreasonable. It often takes that long to get to the root cause of a breach. So let's open it up and talk about that.
Well, you may have to do it in parallel. I mean, I think you may not kind of know exactly what happened, but you still need to deploy the system from a last known good state. Because if you wait, that might be like waiting for an RCA. It may not be realistic if your EHR is down, right?
Yeah, I love to talk about things in analogies. And I saw this question. I started prepping what I thought the right analogy was. And so historically, IR teams have kind of commandeered the situation, and nobody can touch anything because they're doing forensics, and they've got to control it. And I kind of picture that like the CSI coming in and saying, this is a crime scene. No one's allowed in, no one's allowed out. We'll release it when we're done. So exactly to Esteban's point, you're going to have to bring this in and do it in parallel, and you're going to have to be more like a SWAT team. You're going to have to clear every room as you go, and you're going to have to go ahead and proceed with letting that system be recovered back. So your containment should not take 72 hours. If your containment's looking at 72 hours, we need to chat. But full RCA definitely could take longer than 72 hours, but you need to clear every room that you can to be sure that you're recovering your systems as fast as you can. So I do think it is exactly what Esteban said. You can't do it in order. You actually have to start doing it in parallel now. So bring those teams into your IRP.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off you guys, I mean, where I see organizations struggle isn't, again, not the technology or the alerts, it's the decision-making in those critical hours. Who confirms this is a real incident? Who determines scope while things are still unfolding? Who decides whether it's reportable? And at the same time, who's collecting evidence while engineers are trying to contain impact? I mean, again, we're working with a lot of these different teams, and getting not having these things in order is going to burn a lot of time, and the clock doesn't pause while we're trying to debate ownership here. So having these things in order will help us. And to your point, it is not the easiest thing to do, but we have to be prepared and kind of rigor to be able to address these.
So I'll add on to that statement and say that's why you have an IRP, and that's why you do tabletop exercises, and that's why you drill this stuff. And if you don't think you can do it in 72 hours, then you keep drilling it until you do.
Yeah. And then I think I'm going to come over the top on all of it, which is I don't think anybody who wrote this regulation expects you to try to hit the 72-hour mark by exposing all patient records. right? So if you can't hit 72 hours and do it securely and still maintain the protection that you need to do for the EPHI, then take your time, right? And take the ramifications for missing that 72 hours. So be sure that you're upholding the integrity of protecting what's critical here. So I would tell you that if you're going to miss it, and then just be very firm in your standing in front of the regulators and be like, this is why I chose not to hit the 72-hour mark, because I could not put patient records at risk.
And not all users and stakeholders are the same, right? So if you have some kind of downtime procedure to give your ED access first in a more controlled fashion, and your patient portal is down, well, it may be kind of roughly the same system, but you don't need everything, right? You just need the most important things so that you can function, and so that you're not in diversion of emergencies and all the things that we know happen in healthcare in real life.
Thank you. Another question that's come in from the audience around what policies we should be thinking about in terms of best practices.
Oh gosh, there's so many. I would say I would start with your information security policy. You'll definitely need something that's tracking how you're managing risk in your organization. I'm trying to decide if you're referring just to policy, or if you're thinking about policies, procedures, the whole kit and caboodle. But let's think.
Written policies and technical policies as well.
I mean, there's so many, right? Honestly, I would go to ChatGPT or any of go to your favorite AI and type it in and say, I'm trying to resolve for HIPAA. Tell me all your policies, because honestly, that would give you probably a more complete list than I'm going to at this moment. But really your information security, how you're managing risk, how you're dealing with all the different things, your business continuity, how you're dealing with access, how you're dealing with change management, how you're dealing with just really every little aspect of everything in your environment. I'm thinking of our information security policy. We've got probably 30 sections in it for all the different technical aspects of a policy. So there's just a lot that goes into all of those pieces. So that's probably going to give you the most complete list. Go to NIST 853. That will give you a good starting point for all the different types of policies that you might need. But pick a framework and land on it and go.
So I love this. I love this question. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to kind of add on to your point, Nancy, I mean, the technical policies and the safeguards is around access controls, audit controls, integrity, authentication, and transmission. So I would break out each of those controls and build on those policies depending on the technology that you're using. Kind of start from there as the kind of your foundation. And sorry, Chris, I'll let you finish.
No, you're good. So coming in from a completely different perspective, which I often do. So I love the question because it's a greenfield question, right? And so I've rarely met anybody who gets to greenfield their own policies from the beginning and say, what's the best practice to kind of start? And so what I would advise and coach is take the strengths of what you have today, continue to drive those deeper, and then also look at how you can expand that and go wide. And so don't bring in a new technology if you can't afford it, and don't go look to do new process if you don't have the subject matter expertise, right? So focus in on the controls that you can control, because if you ignore those and those become ineffective, you're actually weakening your approach. So be sure that you take what you have today, make sure that that's rock solid, deep. You can demonstrate it, and then start looking for how you can cover other gaps.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to start to close this out. We have about 4 minutes left, and I want to thank each and every one of our speakers, Irfan, Esteban, Nancy, Chris. Thank you for being here and sharing this information with everyone today.
The time to start preparing for the new HIPAA security rules is now. Learn more at armor.com.